Thanks, Tiff. Okay, so if you paid attention to that Bible reading, you might be asking, why on earth are we talking about this story of two prostitutes who come to the king on Mother's Day, of all things? Why did we choose this passage? And the answer is, of course, we didn't. Over the last 10 years, we've been working our way through the Old Testament as a church. Each year we pick a book, and it just so happens we're up to the book of 1 Kings. We started it last week, and this is the passage that we're up to, of all passages on Mother's Day. Quite confronting, but it's quite interesting because it is a story about two mums who both come to the king asking for justice and wisdom, and the mums I meet are always in need of wisdom. They're always asking God for wisdom, so it is quite relevant. And the reality is, all of us need wisdom. What is the one thing we need more than anything else in Australia? Wisdom. That's what we need. Wisdom is the ability to act well in the world. It's what brings your knowledge. It's what integrates your knowledge with an approach to living. But where shall wisdom be found? We're living in an age and day where we have lots of information, but very little wisdom. We have lots of data, but no clarity. Lots of stimulation, but very little synthesis. Lots of distraction, but no stillness. Lots of pontificating, but not much pondering. Lots of opinion, but very little research. And we feel that. We have so much information at our fingertips, but where is the wisdom? One of the books I read this year, which was a highlight, probably one of my favorite books I read this year, is this book by Brett McCracken called The Wisdom Pyramid. I highly recommend it. And in this book, he thinks about how we need a better diet of information and knowledge learning. He says, to become wise in the information age, where opinions, sound bites, diversions, distractions are abundant, but wisdom is scarce, we need to be more discerning about the information we consume. He says, just like eating food, we can have 3 problems when it comes to eating information. He says we can eat too much. Just as eating too much of anything can make you sick, eating too much information into your brain, that can make you sick. We need better habits of how much information we let in. He also says, just as eating too fast will make you pay for it later, so too, fast food is generally not very nutritious. The best food is usually prepared and eaten slowly. And as with good food, so with information. But you and I, we're just like, we get our information fast and we get too much. And the third problem he notices is that we eat often only what tastes good to us. And my guess is that you're all adults now. You know that you've got it. You can't just eat everything that you enjoy eating. My favorite dessert is galaktopouriko, which is a Greek baked custard, but I could not eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would be very sick and ill if that were the case. So too with our information diet. There are things that we're tempted to consume only because we enjoy it, but actually if we're going to be healthy and wise, we need a broad diet. And that's why Brett McCracken calls it, we need a wisdom pyramid. Do you remember in the 80s and 90s, the food authorities came up with the food pyramid to make sure people weren't just drinking Coke all day and that's the only thing they ate with fried chicken or something like that. No, we need a balanced diet, lots of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, fats, meat, etc., and grains. And Brett McCracken, he says, yeah, that's similar in our spirituality. Next slide. The Bible really should make up for the foundation of our diet, and then church, and then nature. He has this beautiful chapter of getting out and being in God's creation, the things that can teach you about wisdom, and then books, beauty, and then the internet and social media. So he has a place for it. He's not a, a technophobe or a anti-technology, but he's just like, that shouldn't make up the main part of our diet. I highly encourage the book and encourage you to read it. So the question is, where do we find wisdom? And there was a young man many centuries ago who at the age of 20 became king of Israel. And history shows this man, Solomon, to have been one of, if not the richest men ever to live, the wisest man ever to live, and incredibly successful, powerful. And at the age of 20, he became king of Israel, and God granted him a wish. He said, "Ask of me whatever you want, and I'll give it to you." And Solomon, at the age of 20, didn't ask for a Tesla. He asked for wisdom. What 20-year-old would do that? Much wiser than my 20-year-old self. And God gave him that wisdom. And we're going to have a look at the kind of wisdom God gave. 3 points today. Wisdom, why we need it. Second point, what it looks like. And then third point, how we get it. So first of all, why we need it. And Grant, can I get you to fill me up? Thanks, buddy. Alrighty, sorry. Why we need it. Why do we need it? If you don't yet, you will soon sense an acute need for wisdom. The older you get, the more you realize, I've got a lot of knowledge, but I still don't know what to do in this situation. And the story read for us is about Solomon. Two women come to him with a dilemma, and Solomon needs wisdom for this situation because he comes up against two things. The first thing he comes up against is a fork in the road. You need wisdom when you come up against a fork in the road. One woman says this, another woman says this. Which one is he going to believe? Going along life, there are often forks in your road. There are two jobs before you. Which one do you take? There are two prospective partners before you. Which one do you date? There are two university degrees. Which one do you take? There are two projects you could give your time to. Which one do you take? There are two suburbs, cities you could live in. Which one do I go and live in? Solomon, who wrote the Proverbs, he says, I'll come to that in a second, but he says we need wisdom because we come to life, there are to forks in life, and we're given a choice. And we need to make that choice, and that's why we need wisdom. One writer said that the age we're living in, we need more wisdom today than anyone else in all of history because we come up again, we have more forks, 100 times the forks in the road that previous generations had. And that's because in previous generations they had less opportunities, less mobility, they met far less people in their lives, there were not as many forks. But you and I, we have so many opportunities before us. We meet so many people, we can do so many things, we have such power and freedom to move and act that there's never been a group of people in the world who need wisdom more than we do. That's the first reason we need wisdom. We come to forks in the road. The second reason we need wisdom is because sometimes the rules don't help. So Solomon has a case brought to him, and it's a family law case. Two women are claiming custody of a child they both claim to be theirs. Now, in our court system, we give our judge rules. So if there's a mother who wants custody of their child, there's a mother and father, and they're both asking for custody, generally, unless there's something broken in the mother and she's doing harmful things to the children, generally the mother gets custody and the father doesn't. We've given rules to our judges to help them make decisions. But Solomon comes up against a situation where no rule actually helps. There are two women who are equal, they're both prostitutes, their life experience is exactly the same, and they are both claiming to be the mother of this child. What do you do when there's not a rule that can dictate what you decide? So sure, if you're going to make a decision, what job should I get? Should I work for the mafia or should I work for Telstra? Like, kind of easy. There's a rule right there, which one to go with. But if you're choosing between Telstra and Optus, that's not going to help you at all. The rules don't help. You need wisdom when the rules don't help you. There's a famous proverb in Proverbs 26. Actually, there are two proverbs together in Proverbs 26, verse 4 and 5, which seem contradictory. Proverbs 26, verse 4 says, "Don't answer a fool according to his folly." So if you got someone foolish and stupid and irritating in your life, don't answer them. Don't enter into it with them. That's what Proverbs 26 verse 4 says. And then the very next proverb, which is written by Solomon, says, answer a fool according to his folly. In other words, you got someone being stupid before you, you should enter into conversation with that guy and tell them they're being stupid. Now, a simple reading of the Bible would just go, oh, that's stupid. Like, who's written this? They didn't even realize what they'd just written. But actually, Solomon's doing something very, very interesting there. He's saying, actually, you need wisdom to work out whether to answer the fool according to his folly or not answer a fool according to his folly. Is it right to take an unreasonable person and enter into debate with them and try and refute them? Or is it better with an unreasonable person just to walk away and have no discussion at all? What is the answer of the Proverbs? Well, the answer of Proverbs is sometimes it's a disaster to enter into debate with a fool. But other times it's a disaster not to enter into debate with that fool. So you can't rely on the rules. Sometimes you can't rely on the rules. You have to rely on wisdom. Now, what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to connect and see relationships between all the information before you. I'll give you an example. My favorite surfer in the world is Kelly Slater. At age 50, in January, I think it was, he won the Pipeline Masters surfing competition. You all seem so excited. I was very excited. At age 50, this is the greatest surfing location in the world, the biggest, most challenging barreling waves in the world. Only the best of the best win here, and it was a week before his 50th birthday, he won against the best surfers in the world. He is the greatest of all time athlete in any sport. That's what I'm putting out there, but anyway. But it's incredible, and people notice, what is it that makes Kelly Slater such an amazing surfer? And people will notice that he'll show up at any surfing spot around the world, and he'll very quickly be able to read what's happening in the lineup, in the waves, what the tide's doing, what the wind's doing, and how the wave's going. In other words, I'm out there and I've got the same information coming at me, all the same information, and yet I will connect one thing with another and try and paddle for a wave, and I'll do a Toby on that wave, right? But Kelly Slater, while I see maybe one or two things, he will see 100 things that I have seen, but I can't connect. And he has the ability to connect 100 things and arrange it so that he takes off in the exact right spot. And the key with barrel riding is you've got to make these micro adjustments to your surfboard. You've got to be so present, so aware of every little bump in the wave that you're able to ride through it. And he does that better than anyone in the world. He is a wise surfer. Wisdom is the ability to connect the dots, to see all the information. You don't just need information, you need to be able to see the relationships between all the information. And that is what he is able to do. Now, almost anyone probably knows that when it comes to speaking, all of us know that we need to be honest, we need to have good intentions when we say our words, and we shouldn't be harmful. They are the rules of speaking, right? But here's the thing, there are times in my life where I wish I hadn't said what I said, and probably this is true of you as well, where what you have said, it's well-intentioned, you're really not trying to harm the other person. You've been honest and you really are trying to be helpful, but the words you said were an absolute disaster, and that's because you lacked wisdom. You saw a whole bunch of information, but you didn't connect all the dots. And what Solomon's saying in the Proverbs is sometimes it's foolish to answer a fool according to his folly, and sometimes it's wise. And the wise person is who is able to notice everything that's going on and respond appropriately. They are the two reasons that we need wisdom. We come to forks in the road And what do you do when you come up against things where there is no rule? That's the need for it. Second point is, well, what does wisdom look like? And I want to take you through this brilliant story because it is a cracker of a story. And I want to show you Solomon's wisdom in this story. Solomon's 20 years of age. He's been given by God wisdom. And the very next story after God's given him wisdom is a court case really to test what Solomon's wisdom is like. And he comes out shining. And here's how the court case goes. Now, 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. Immediately, you see a little bit of the wisdom of Solomon. He doesn't show partiality to the rich, the princes, and the powerful. His court is open to even prostitutes, those without power, those who are outcasts from society. They get the hearing of the king. Incredible. One of them said, "Pardon me, my lord." She's polite. "This woman and I live in the same house, and I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us." In other words, there are no other eyewitnesses that you can draw on. It's just my word against hers in this situation. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her head down and put her dead son by my breast. Tragic. The next morning I got up to nurse my son and he was dead, but when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born. So there is a tragic situation. 2 prostitutes in what we assume to be a brothel. There are no clients around, just the 2 of them. They both have a baby. One night, one of the women rolls over, crushes her baby. Terrible tragedy. She wakes up and in great grief, she swaps the dead baby for her neighbor's baby. In the morning, the neighbor wakes up and is like, "This isn't my child." And the one who feels like her baby's been switched out goes to the king and says, "Can we have justice here? Come and do justice." Now, at this point, you're Solomon, and you've just heard her story. Do you believe her? Do you believe her story? When I read this, it sounds to me like she's telling the truth. Who would come up with a story like this? But wise Solomon tells us in his book of Proverbs, he says, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Okay, so let's give a hearing to the other woman. What does she say? Verse 22, the other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours." Now, the brevity, even the sharpness of the second woman's words don't draw out our sympathy like the first woman's. She offers no arguments. She simply denies the first woman's story was true. She didn't claim to know how the child had died. She denied that it was her child that died, and she denied that she had been involved in the baby swap. Now, do you believe her? What do you make of her story? The confusion continues as the first woman sticks to her story. The first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. So what started as 2 women coming before the king and asking him for justice ended up them having this shouting match at one another in the presence of the king. Now, how do you work out, what do you think? Who's right, who's wrong? The next slide. Who is the true mother? Who do you think is the true mother? Do you think it's the woman who says, "Hey, this woman's son died, so she took my son"? Do you reckon she's telling the truth? Or do you reckon the other one who says, "No, the living one's my son, the dead one's yours"? Which mother is the true mother? Turn to the person next to you, and I want you to problem solve this with the people around you. Who is the true mother? And why do you think they are the true mother? Okay. Alrighty. I am going to, we're going to take a vote. We are the jury, and we are going to take a vote in just a second. But does anyone want to offer evidence, or anyone want to speak on behalf of one of the woman's innocence? You don't have to agree that this woman is, because I want to keep that a little bit anonymous, but anyone want to offer some evidence as to why one or the other woman might be innocent or not? Yes, Hannah. Yes.
We think you would notice if you were lying there and someone came to take your baby, you would wake up. So we don't think it happened.
So you guys think woman 2 is the real mum. You think woman 1's making it up. Okay, who else? Who wants to have a go? Any other evidence for one or the other? Anyone else? No one's game? Okay, let's take a vote. Who thinks woman 1 is the true mum, the one who comes up with this story? She's stolen my baby. Okay, fantastic. Hands down. Who thinks woman 2 is the real mum? Okay, 50-50. And who is on the fence? You don't know. Okay, look at all you weak-willed people. Just make a decision. Okay, now it's a trick question. I'm sorry to say, and that's why I didn't want anyone going out too far on a limb there, because here's the issue. There is no way of knowing at this point who the real mother is without showing partiality. You have both women claiming something to be true, and I'll tell you where my heart goes to. My heart goes to the first woman. She tells a very moving story. The first time I read this, I'm like, she's totally the true mother, isn't she? And then I had to follow up at the end. I'm like, surely she's the true mother, right? But actually, at the end of the story, we're not told which of these mums were the real mother, and I'll show you that in just a second. By giving us no more than the information of what each woman claims, the narrator has cleverly put us in the same position as the king. We don't know which woman's telling the truth. And any inclination to one or the other, it's simply prejudice. Now, it's interesting that so many of us made a call there that one is right and the other is wrong. Biblical wisdom, one woman, I'm very moved to the first person's because she tells this beautiful story, it's detailed, and I kind of think, having your child die, that's hard, but having your someone else's child die and then stealing yours, that's awful. So my heart moves towards her. But sympathy has nothing to do with the truth. And biblical wisdom cares for the truth, and it seeks evidence for the truth. And so Solomon demonstrates his wisdom firstly by avoiding partiality to the better storyteller. At this point, he cannot decide which the true mother is, and that's why he has to set in motion something else, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But let me do a little aside on this, because I think something's going on in our society right now which is quite similar. Can we have the next slide? Has anyone else been engrossed in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp saga? Some of us, right? My wife and I have been watching YouTube on and on and on, just watching every crazy thing happen. And it's very sad. These are two human beings talking about one of the darkest parts of their lives. And in some ways, we're treating it like entertainment, which is problematic. If you don't know, they are both claiming to be victims of domestic abuse within a relationship. Amber Heard, in 2016, wrote a newspaper article, an opinion piece, which alleged that Johnny Depp was violent towards her, and he's come out defending himself, and he's suing her for $50 million, is it? Because it's hurt his career, etc., etc. And it's tragic watching their lives unravel the way it is. But here's what I think's happening right now, is that Johnny Depp is winning the sympathy of the majority of people, and Amber Heard has struggled to win the sympathy of people. And those who are on board with the Me Too movement are actually, many of them are angry with Amber Heard because they feel like she's exploited the movement to extract revenge, money, and publicity for herself. And those who think the Me Too movement have gone too far, they love this moment because it's an example of a male abuse victim, and so they're able to start saying that without being accused of being misogynistic. Now, it's interesting, if either of those is your view, you'll tend to watch the case and seek out justification for your position. But it's not just that. As we watch the trial, the personality of each character impacts whether you believe one person is telling the truth or lies. And that is the danger of the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion is won by being likable. And right now, Johnny Depp, I think most people find him a lot more likable than Amber Heard. And the way Amber Heard's been trolled on TikTok and Twitter is just very, very sad. And there's a lot of hate towards her because the way she has conducted herself is a little less likable. But likability doesn't tell you what happened. So if you're a Christian, you should be very slow to form an opinion on what's happening, and you should be very suspicious of where your heart goes based on who you like better. I'll give you an example of how this turned out in an absolute tragedy. Growing up in the 80s, Lindy Chamberlain, her name was always a little bit fishy. I didn't really know what happened. I watched The Simpsons and I heard the expression, "A dingo got my baby," right? Which has come down into popular folklore as a joke. How has the mauling of a baby by a dingo become a joke in society? She was at Uluru in 1980 and she claimed that a dingo got her baby and took it off and there was blood everywhere. And society didn't believe her. And society didn't believe her because she didn't fit the bill for how a grieving mother should look. It didn't matter that not a single skerrick of hard evidence pointed to her guilt. It didn't matter that the apparent blood spatter found in her car was actually paint splashback mixed with iron oxide from her hometown of Mount Isa. It didn't matter that she was supposedly committing a murder, disposing of a body and wiping herself clean of blood within under 10 minutes. It didn't matter that several Indigenous leaders and elders living at Uluru at the time bore witness to a fresh dingo track the day following Azaria's disappearance. It didn't matter that several bystanders at the time heard the baby crying as soon as the dingo attacked. None of this mattered because Lindy Chamberlain didn't cry enough. She wasn't likable. And so because of the court of public opinion, she was condemned to life imprisonment with hard labour in 1980. The decision was overturned in 1984. She was exonerated in 1988. So here we have to be very suspicious of our instincts when it comes to judging people. Solomon knows that. And that's why he realizes he doesn't have enough information. All he has is the testimony of both women. One is very brief, one is very long, and perhaps he starts seeing through the long woman's testimony because what does she say? Hey, when I was asleep, she rolled over, crushed him, swapped the babies, but I was asleep. How does she know that if she was asleep? Her eyes weren't open. If they were, she would have stopped it. And then the other woman, she just simply says, didn't happen. That's my baby. This is my baby. So how do you work out? If you're Solomon, what do you do? And here's a situation where Solomon required wisdom. Okay, so what does Solomon do? Well, in verse 24, he surprises everyone and he says, bring me a sword. And that would have been terrifying for the women. Going on, so they brought a sword to the king. The tension must have been immense. Were these two women, prostitutes, about to be slain for their immoral occupation? Were they about to lose their life for the ruckus they'd caused in the royal court, fighting against one another without any dignity? They're bickering. Were they about to be killed for that? But when the king spoke again, it was worse than anyone feared. And I haven't put it on the screen, but this is what he gave the order: to cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. He commands his servants to perform the unthinkable atrocity. And if you're sitting there in the ancient world, that's kind of what kings do. Here you are, two women prostitutes bickering in the courtroom, and it's like the king just gets exasperated. He's like, all right, you want justice? Split the frickin' baby in two, and you can have half, and you can have half. That happened in the ancient world. Exasperated kings who don't really care about justice. Such injustice would not have been uncommon. But as soon as he says that, one of the women interrupts. And this is what we're told. The woman whose son was alive, the narrator tells us which woman it is. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, don't give her the living baby. Don't kill him." She says, "I would rather me not have the baby and her have the baby than the baby be dead." She's saying, don't ruin his life, ruin mine. Don't split his life in two, split my soul in two. Don't ruin him, ruin me. Very quickly, you're seeing the heart of a mother there. And then verse 27, the other woman said, "Neither I nor you shall have him." Cut him in two. And in that moment, Solomon wisely had connected the dots. Here is one woman who's terribly grieved and tormented with profound emotions. She had lost her child, and bitter jealousy over the injustice of her loss caused her to do something absolutely unthinkable. And here is this other woman who clearly has a mother's heart. She would rather her life be ruined than her son's life be ruined. She offers up her son and her life to be harmed than for her son's life to be harmed. I love what Jono shared earlier about his mum and the way motherhood is just ministry and servanthood, and how much mums put aside what they want for the sake of their kids. And you see this clearly in this situation. But the trick is, we're left wondering, well, which of the two women earlier was the one that Solomon gave the baby to? You see verse 27? Then the king gave this ruling: give the living baby to the first woman, don't kill him, she is his mother. Now that's actually a mistranslation. The Hebrew doesn't say give the living baby to the first woman. It says give the baby to this woman. And we're not there. We don't see which way he points the finger. In other words, we don't know which of the two women earlier on was the true mother. We don't know. But Solomon did. He'd sorted it out, but we can't sort it out. He was a king whose wisdom gave him the ability to sort out a situation which you and I can't sort out. And so verse 38, when all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe, because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. What a king they had. They rejoiced. He had the wisdom of God to do justice. And that word justice appears twice in this summary. And that's what kings are meant to bring to their people: the right ordering of relationships within society. And when we have wise leadership over our country, over our nation, over a kingdom, the people prosper. They're at peace. They rejoice. They experience prosperity, because that's what wisdom brings. And no wonder the people's first response is to hold in awe their king. And notice what kind of case this was. His first act of justice and wisdom, it wasn't international politics. It wasn't local economics. It was a fight between two women at the ground level who had something profoundly painful going on in their life. And he took the time to listen, to hear, to work through it, and to come to a wise outcome. That's what wisdom looks like, the ability to bring all the pieces together and to see the picture and to act wisely. That's the second thing. Thirdly and finally, how do we get this kind of wisdom? Because Solomon's wisdom was a remarkable kind of wisdom. He asked God for wisdom and God granted it. You know, in the New Testament reading which Tiff gave us, in James, Jesus' brother, he writes to a church in the ancient world and he says, hey, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously. What God offered Solomon, ask of me whatever you wish, God offers you today. You want wisdom? Ask me. I'm willing to give it. But not a kind of wisdom that will help you indulge your selfishness. The wisdom he gave Solomon was a wisdom that would bring justice to relationships, that would connect people, that would do righteousness in society and build the kingdom of God on earth. If you lack that kind of wisdom, ask God and he will give you it. Solomon was a great one. He was a man of true wisdom, and his people rejoiced in his leadership. Just reflect on these two prostitutes. They get an audience with the king. What other ruler in the world would give an audience to two prostitutes like this? And see how gently and wisely and patiently he deals with these women. He listens to their cases. He deliberates. He isn't prone to partiality. He took the time to consider the case. He treated them as real people. And as a result, the two prostitutes have the confidence to approach the throne of the most powerful man in the world at the time. I mean, I wouldn't have the confidence to approach the throne of Solomon, but they did. Why? Because he was known for his just, kind rule. Solomon was good, but he's not our king. If you're a Christian, Jesus Christ is your king. And when he came, someone greater than Solomon walked the earth. He offers himself to us as our king to sort out our problems, to forgive our sins. And he offers us to come to his throne of grace for our time of help. As I read this story in 1 Kings, I'm reminded of another story in John chapter 8 of the adulterous woman whom the Pharisees come, they catch her in the act of adultery and they throw her at Jesus' feet. Do you remember this story? And they say, the law says we should stone women like this. What do you say we should do? And the hypocrisy of the Pharisees is highlighted by the fact that if you get caught in the act of adultery, where's the guy? Typical that they don't bring him and they just throw her at Jesus' feet. And it's quite the dilemma, isn't it? Because if Jesus says, no, spare the woman, they will say, we always knew you were going to trample on the law of God, that you don't care about the law of God. But if he cares about the law, if he says, no, uphold the law, then they're going to be like, yeah, we always knew your talk about forgiveness and love and grace was all hogwash. Like, here's the moment, where is it? And so they have Jesus by the horns. It's like, is he going to uphold the law and trample on the woman? Or is he going to trample on the law and uphold the woman? What does he do in that situation? He needs the wisdom of Solomon. And so you remember what he says? He says to them, okay, you who are without sin, you can cast the first stone. For that's what the law said. If you're going to be a judge in a trial, you cannot be guilty of the thing that you're judging someone else of. And slowly all the men walk away. First the older ones, and then the younger ones, until it's just Jesus and the woman left. Jesus has no sin, so he can cast the first stone. But he doesn't, and he says to the woman, "Woman, where are they?" And she says, "No, they've gone, sir." And then he says, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and leave your life of sin." It's a beautiful moment where Jesus upholds the law. He calls it sin. He tells her, you need to leave your life of sin. but he doesn't condemn her. He upholds the law. There was a real penalty for her sin, and rather than her paying that penalty, he knows that's where he's going. He's going to die on the cross to bear the penalty for her sin so that she can leave not condemned. He upholds the woman and upholds the law by laying his life down for her salvation. And in that moment, with those beautiful words, Jesus, our Creator, King, Judge, Savior, and friend, he's creating a new kingdom of grace where women like that woman, men and women like you, can hear the words, not condemned. We live in a world that's so angry, so full of hate, so full of criticism, and Jesus comes into this world to break that down. He comes into the world to create a place of acceptance and joy and mercy for people who are undeserving. Isn't that why you're here today? That's why I'm here. That's why Jesus is here. He's here to create a place of grace. That's what the church is. And he rules our church as the wise king. This is our king. This is his wisdom. He doesn't condone what she did. He calls it sin, but he says, leave your life of sin and I won't condemn you. I'll be condemned in your place. Is he your king? Solomon famously said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. He doesn't mean the terror of the Lord. He means the awe of the Lord, the love for the Lord. When God is big in your life, and he ought to be, because he is the biggest thing in the universe. He upholds everything. He's the meaning of life. And if you fail to incorporate into your vision of what life is about God, then you can't join the dots. You won't be able to join the dots. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and it begins with awe and wonder and love at how God has treated us. It is the mixture of reverence and pleasure, joy and awe. And that's what Jesus demonstrates. Solomon is at the very height of his leadership of the kingdom of Israel at this moment. Wise as, but it's all downhill from here. Jesus, it just goes up and up and up from here. And that's why we trust him. The book of 1 Kings is meant to show us, hey, human kings, they're okay. Some of them are okay, but they'll all fail us. There's only one ruler and master and king who you can entrust your life to, who is safe. His name is Jesus. Give your life to him. Let me pray. Father God, we thank you for the wisdom of Jesus, who's found a way to both uphold your law and uphold us in salvation. We need his wisdom to live our lives. And we ask that you might grant us the wisdom to live in a way that's just and right in all the circumstances of our lives so that your kingdom may grow. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.